Did it simplify things? Did it complicate things compared to having a diesel? What about the maintenance? Was it easy running? Environmental incentives. I was able to get a grant. Hello, I'm Hayden Bloomfield and welcome to the channel. Can an EV work for a garden maintenance business? The reason I'm answering this question is because I own and run a garden maintenance business and I've had it as a company, as a sole trader, one-man team, and up to teams of like 9 people. So I'll answer the question and I'll try and answer it as well as if this is someone from a larger company and how it could potentially operate as that larger scale. So let's jump in. So my story, I started off just as my own, working at the age of 21. I had a car, a Ford Fiesta, that I started working around and just picked up little garden jobs here and there and gradually built it up, as well as building up my knowledge and skill base and tool base, same as how many people started off. As that grew, I got myself my first diesel van and carried on building, had started to use like self-employed people for a day here, a day there to help me out. Gradually that became more consistent, where I was having people as self-employed doing quite a few days a week with me, and eventually started employing people, employed my first couple of people, and got another van where I had a 3.5 ton transit tipper, which is diesel of course, and carried on building the team. Started becoming more interested in EVs and building the company, especially in a more environmentally driven direction. So we transferred to a lot of battery tools and obviously moved to EV. So purchased a Nissan EMV200. The reason I chose this van was because at the time it had the longest range of vans of a similar size, and also it had great space inside. There is a couple of things like where we did have VW Caddy as a small van, and then obviously went to the EMV200, which is slightly bigger, which is brilliant, more space, more waste, that sort of thing. However, the only challenge we had with the space was that for the mower and the ramp for the mower slotted perfectly in the Caddy, whereas in the Nissan it was a bit too big, so it would move around. But that's complete, you can literally fix that with an appropriate like block in the way to hold the ramp. Initially working from my mum's home with a team, multiple vans, how did it work with an EV? Was it efficient? Did it simplify things? Did it complicate things compared to having a diesel? Answer: simplified things so much in one sentence, made it so much easier. Here's the reason why. With a diesel, it meant obviously there's a much greater range. You're talking, we could fill the van up and get hundreds of miles of range out of it for the tank. So the Caddy and Lecky, we named the Nissan Lecky. Caddy and Lecky, they were used for the day-to-day maintenance rounds, team of 2 going in garden to garden or on larger sites, some of them if the waste stayed there. We used the tipper for obviously the large jobs where we'd be there all day long generating tons of waste as well as big clearance. And further, we would collect the waste on the tipper and just let it build up for like a month and then go and tip it. So on the rounds, it made things easier because where I had the team out in diesel vans initially, it would just be a case of keeping track of the vans. I would use them like, obviously to go look at jobs and such in between when they were out working. So I'd just monitor it, and when it's low, go and fuel up and make a point in my day of like, right, need to fill the vans up, I'll fuel up. Or if I hadn't been in the van in a while, the team would come back and just be like, oh, it's fuel lights on if you want to go fill up. Or they would go and fill it up during the round if they had time to. When we transferred to the EV, it simplified things for the one reason that we haven't plug outside on the driveway. So literally it means they come back at the end of the day, plug the van in as part of the end of day routine of putting all the tools away, etc., cleaning everything up, plug the van in, done, ready to leave for the morning. When they arrive in the morning, switch it off, take it out and everything. And even just the Nissan has a range of like 120, 150 miles, even if, as I said, like, if they rinse through a lot of that in the day, if we're doing jobs further afield, that's fine. We only ever went, I think the furthest job is like 20, 30 miles away. You don't really want to be going further than that. It's rare that we ever would. So it's just a case of if they rinse through a particularly large amount of battery, they just stick it on charge for the night. And yeah, once you've got all the tools, all the waste, 2 guys in the van, driving all day long, going up and down the motorway, you can go through that battery, but you've still got 120 miles of range, sort of at your 100 miles of range at your worst that we've noticed, unless you are sitting there like foot to the floor flying along 100 miles an hour, which I've not done. I have driven it like uneconomically, I'd say, and still you would easily get 100 miles of range out of it. So it's feasible. But then there were days where they could go out and work for most of the week and it wouldn't even need charging. They just go out, do a local round, come back, leave the van, go out, and the next day they're doing a local round again. And it's only like day 3, day 4 where they go, oh, we've only got 20% battery, we'll stick it on charge tonight and have it full ready for the morning. It became much more convenient because it is just a case of come in, plug it in, do we need to plug it in, yes or no? Simple. Compared to with the diesel vans where it's, do we need to actively go and fill up? Is there going to be a queue at the petrol station? Is there going to be issues fueling up? Is there going to be a fuel crisis where we can't even get fuel as it is anyway? None of that for the EV, just come at home, plug it in. Once I'd expanded the team and then moved into a yard where we was then storing the vans there and they weren't really coming home at all, and I would use Lecky as my vehicle to and fro. Point on in terms of vans, I've always bought the vans outright. So the first one, the Caddy, was bought, it was like coming up for 10 years old, wasn't quite. The Tipper was sort of 5 years old when I bought it, or not even 5 years old when I bought it, and then Lecky, when I bought it, was brand new that year. So in 2020 I bought the van. It had been owned for a short period of time, done 700 miles, and then was sold back to the dealer, so therefore I was able to purchase it at a much cheaper price with low mileage. And in terms of that cost, it was a much more upfront cost. So like for my first van was around 4 grand, second van was around 12, 14 grand, and then Lecky was 28 grand. However, because of the environmental incentives, I was able to get a grant, like SME grant, that paid towards like 30% of the cost, and plus I'd become VAT registered during the process, and buying it from a dealer meant I could write off the VAT. So it became a lot cheaper once I got that support and help from the grant and becoming VAT registered. So that was a massive assistance in being able to afford it. But it was, as the company was running, we'd saved up and had the cash flow to support it and make sure we could buy it. The reason I didn't lease or do any sort of PCP deal was just in business, I've always liked the idea of not having debt and just having the money set aside. And where I'd sort of built up the team and we had the 2 vans we could operate from, it was only when it was like becoming desperate that I got the 3rd van. So I had the money sitting in the bank that we could afford to then just buy it outright rather than leasing it. But I think moving forward, if I was to carry on and grow, and like this is coming onto the subject of larger companies, I would be more incentivized to just do leasing, where you'd have to do research into this. But I'd like the idea that you just have the van for a few years, because the technology is advancing so quickly. You could just lease, have it for like 3-4 years, whatever the deal is, hand it back at the end of that, get a brand new vehicle, rewrap it with your branding or whatever, and just go there and repeat that cycle all the way through, so that you minimize the maintenance on your vehicle. Especially if you've got tens, hundreds of vans, you haven't really got to deal with then the maintenance in terms of the MOT, the servicing, etc., because it's all dealt with via where you've leased it from. So that would be a thing I'd look into. I never did it, but as I said, moving forward, I would have in forecasting the growth of the company, looking at expanding with new teams, that would just be part of the overhead of running the team would be, whereas before it was the upfront cost of a team would be like, oh, this expensive van, all of these tools. So the upfront cost of a team is getting into like 30, 40 grand. So they have to go and generate the revenue in order to pay back. Whereas instead with leasing, obviously the benefit is if you're doing 200, 300, 400 pounds a month on a vehicle, the upfront cost of investing in that team becomes less than 10 grand with all the equipment. But then it just means the monthly overhead is greater. So it depends, like do your own research and your own modelling and what works better for your business model. But in the game of being in garden maintenance, you have got the advantage of regular work, and our work was structured on repeating monthly fees. So for us, it would make a lot of sense to have this monthly fixed cost, as that's exactly how our customers are paying us. So they're not paying us up front, so there's no reason to pay for the van up front, we can just lease it. The only issue I've got is the nature of the work in gardening is because of how dirty the van gets, covered in mud. Like in the vans, I've seen grass growing. So that may be a problem when it comes to returning the vehicle. So make sure to have that conversation up front and go into as much detail and just have clarity over what condition the van needs to be in when you return it is the only thing I would say. Back to the point of expanding, we're at a yard. And the yard I had, I suppose it depends what your yard's like, but for us it was sort of this cabin with, you could easily park 10 vehicles out the front. And for us we had a shutter, a door, and just spaces out the front, where for us it was just a case of the exact same thing. The guys would go out, do the round, come back, does the van need charging? Yep, plug it in. There was plenty of plugs inside where the lead just ran. We just left the shutter literally an inch and it would run underneath. We're sorted. Had I expanded and gone to like 5, 10, 15 vehicles, well, if I got past 10, I wouldn't have been able to fit them all there. But if I was getting close to 10 vehicles, it'd just be a case of pretty much extension leads. But otherwise, then we'll probably just move on to charging points. But you can do a lot with just having an extension lead, have it on a timer, so that you just, if you've got vans that need 8 hours of charge throughout the night and they don't need the full 12 hours, that you're leaving shift and coming back, or however long it is. You can just set a timer, have them all plugged in, done. Just be careful with how many plugs you plug into a single outlet, because bear in mind their vehicle chargers, they're extracting like 3 kilowatts when they charge. But at the yard we had so many plugs in there that it was brilliant, and if we did have 5 vans, wouldn't have been a problem. You can just work around, and just like as any business owner, you just, when you're faced with a problem, you find a way to solve it and move forward. And that would have just been a case for us of getting charging points fitted to the outside of the yard, so that it would be on charge for less time, more energy is extracted, we can charge them up a lot easier, a lot quicker, and save on fuel. Further, when I looked at expanding the company and was growing it in that direction, one thing I did theorise in the future was starting to work with having teams that would do like the Monday to Friday round, having a weekend team that just sort of did some casual work, and then having maybe night shift for certain works that would be better to do when it is quieter and you're not going to have people around and such, depending on what it is, like business car parks or motorway works, that sort of thing. So the vans would be in constant use. That would be a different issue that I'd have to then work around and solve, which I haven't done, so I don't know the answer to that. But I'd imagine you'd have different vans for different things. But anyway, I digress. That's not a problem I've solved, and that's not what this video is about. So that's kind of giving you a grasp of how the day worked. Was it efficient? Did it work effectively? Straight answer is just yes. It was so much better, so much more effective and efficient, especially like at the yard with multiple vans. It was quickly becoming a nuisance to me, the idea of fueling, because I would actually have to go out and do that as a separate standalone task. And when I theorised how the company would expand, it was if I was having like a yard manager or just a team manager, that would then fall onto them to fuel the van, sorry. So when they come back, if we had any diesels, they'd have to go out and fuel it, or we start to do something with the team being able to take vans home, and then they'd have to fuel it with a company card, etc. But with the electric, it's just a case of come back, plug it in, guys, and just that person at the office or manager has the responsibility at the end of the day just to go around, plugged in, done, sorted. Challenge would be if you are in the business, if your business model allows your team to take vans home, that's where you start to have a challenge in terms of how they're going to charge at home. Is that viable? How do you compensate them for that? Because obviously if they use a company card, they just fill it up. Whereas if they're charging, you could just say you use charging points, and again, company card, company account, you then pay for the charge. So again, not an issue I can solve, but for yourself to work out. Was it cheaper? Short answer, yes, literally. So with the Caddy going out doing its round compared to the Nissan doing its round, the company was spending around about £40 a week on diesel, compared to when we moved to the Nissan. After a year, we averaged out at £40 a month. You can easily see huge cost savings going to electric. Further to that, there's also the vehicle tax. So like for the Caddy, it's now £275 a year for the vehicle tax, whereas the Nissan is £0 because it is electric. What about the maintenance? Was it easy running? So the Nissan is a brand new vehicle, so obviously it's a lot more reliable. But as you probably know, in an electric vehicle, you've got so fewer components and so fewer moving parts, it becomes much easier to maintain, and there's less that can go wrong. The amount of things that have gone wrong on the Caddy and the Transit Tipper, I could spend all day listing them. And compared to the Nissan, we've not really had any problems at all with anything other than a few. It was just like one door wouldn't shut properly, which is just something you get on a van. Nothing in terms of battery running, breaking down, none of that. However, I've had that plenty of times where the guys have been broken down on the motorway because something gone wrong with an engine component. One thing I mentioned earlier, but want to reiterate, can it still get sufficient range with the heating on in the winter, in the freezing cold, with a team in there, all the tools, all this waste, all that weight? Yes, so the range on the Nissan's around 150 miles. However, freezing cold winter of 0 degrees, with the weight of all the waste we're generating, with a team in there with the heating on constantly, yep, the range was still, as I said, 100 or more miles, which in a day you're not doing that, and it'd be very rare that we would. So I think expanding the company, I'd probably always keep 1 or 2 diesel trucks for the time being, until like future time where you had much larger ranges, just for those jobs that are further afield that were far and few between. Or even in your business model, you could expand in the future, just hire a van when you need that job and put that into your pricing, because there can be very rare jobs that you go miles away. And equally in the summer with the air conditioning on, I think the guys did use it. I never really use it, just undo the window. But yeah, air conditioning is still fine. You still get the sufficient range. You're only taking a couple of miles off of the range by using the heating or the air conditioning. Problems that you could have moving to EV, the only problem I've really been able to think of is that if the guys forget to plug it in and if your manager makes a mistake. So if you do make the mistake of not fueling a diesel van, then it's like, right, well, you've got to spend the first half hour of your day going and fueling. Whereas if that happens with the EV, it's you are quite buggered and you'd have to like get guys out in their own vehicles or something. Or if there is like a fast charger near you, you could then go and fast charge it, but it would take sort of half hour, an hour to do that. So there is that challenge. That's the only problem really. Other than that, it would be if something like the battery goes wrong and it's not covered under warranty. Whereas if you're leasing, you haven't got that problem because it's not your responsibility. However, if you do purchase outright, you have got that problem. So there we go. That's in terms of can your garden maintenance business go EV, go electric. My business did. We went fully electric with the vehicles, with all the tools. Apart from the only thing we haven't changed over is the mower, which could be changing in the future. We never know. It depends. Well, if you watch this channel, my videos, you know that I've pretty much got rid of most of the business apart from a small part-time round on my own, which, yeah, if I need to get a new mower, I would get a battery one now, probably. That is the only thing with the technology. But I'll go into more videos in the future around the battery tools and what they're actually like. So until then, thanks for watching. If you've liked this video and it's been valuable, please make sure to like, hit the subscribe button and the notification button. And I'll see you next time. Bye.